Our first topic to talk about is the cultural heritage and cultural landscape. I would like to ask you, what do you think about your place in the world? How do you perceive yourself? How do you feel? What is your place? Please think about it. Because everybody of us is a part of the world, is a part of culture, and is a part of the constructions around us. Architecture is an intervention in the landscape environment, which reflects the perception of space, especially time, society, and values. Something valuable from the past maybe is not such valuable right now, and maybe we do not understand the trends, the styles, the forms, and so on. But architecture shows us not only what we wanted to build, but also cultural values and cultural norms. British architect Kenneth Frampton says that architecture is an applied science. It's a form of fine art, a craft dedicated to the formation of the human environment. Maybe the buildings, the architecture around us is not only a construction, iron or steel or whatever it's made from, but it's something more, it's something hidden, it's something what has a special language. It's the language of architecture, and we should understand what it means. Swiss architect Siegfried Gideon says that architecture should interpret the way of life, because it's not only us, it's about the space around us, and it means that we should live in conditions that are made for us. And Norwegian architect Norbert Schulz says that architecture provides people with existential support, helps us to find our place in the world. So maybe this different point of view on what architecture means can open your eyes and show you the perspective of what maybe the cultural landscape architecture means when it's linked together in a relation. The landscape affects the human soul, and man creates a certain kind of landscape, but it influences and completes it in retrospect. It means that the culture, the landscape are not separated. They are lived, they coexist together, and they influence the activities and thinking of people. It's important where you live, and it's important in what conditions and what kind of buildings you look around, you can see around you. And then in the past and also right now, people transfer their ideas into transformation of nature and thus create a cultural landscape. When we look at the past, we see that the thinking of people was transformed into real shapes, into real buildings, into reality. And this is what we are doing right now. We search a modern way of coexistence with nature, with coexistence with past, and this is the question of how we are going to transform the cultural heritage and in what form. So cultural landscape is based on cultivation, and it contains designed places, pathways, areas that specify how people understand the natural environment, because we are still part of nature. We are not separated from nature. We belong to nature, and we are still nature creatures. So man is a product of nature and its part. Humanity is constantly looking for new ways of living in the world. When you look around you, it's not important where you are. You see how we try to coexist together as a mankind, how we try to coexist together with nature and how we try to coexist with the heritage of the past. And we have to learn and we have to take care about how it's going to be, how it should be, and on what basis it should be developed into the future. What we see as trends in current society all around the world, it's urbanization of settlements. Cities are growing, cities are getting to be bigger and bigger, and we need to find home for many people. So this is a big topic, a huge topic about developers, about construction, about ruins, about what we do with our environment around us. Then it's urban growth because, as I told you right now, it's a question of protection. What we should protect and why, and what we should not protect and why. Then it's development of suburbs. It's marginal parts of cities that are going to be a separated location with almost all services that are maybe not connected to the city, but they belong to a bigger city. And it's a special culture around, it's a special habits about, it's rituals, it's in form also of cultural transformation. And then it's an enhancement of indoor development. So it's also a big question. So when we look around us, the world is changing. We have new materials, new technologies, inventions, and so on. But what people really need is to be and to live in the world that is suitable to them and one where they feel really, really good and not bad. And that's important. So when we look back at the main topic of cultural landscape, and if we search for what it means deeply, we are going to the topic of cultural heritage. But before we start with cultural heritage, it's about a place and character of this place. I'm sure that you were somewhere, I don't know, in the world, in your country, around, abroad, and you found a place with a special character, with a special ambience, atmosphere, when you felt something special in. Maybe positive, maybe negative, it depends on you. And this is important for creation of a place and for something more hidden in this place. So the words country or landscape and memory are magical in a way because they open up a whole host of thoughts about who we are, where our home is, and what this home might look like. They are closely related to our life and living the place. So it's not important where you are now. Maybe you live in a medieval building and maybe you live in an apartment without lift. It's not important. It's important to feel and to be really not linked, but to be in relation to this place. And you can call this place home. And maybe you call home your city, your town where you are staying. This is also important. And when we go to architecture, architecture means making the genius of the genius loci visible. And the task of architecture is to create a place filled with meaning and to help people to live. I want to say that this is important, that you make visible the genius loci of the place and the spirit of this place. To be more exact and not to talk on these high levels and not maybe easy to understand. There are special local places in your country, in my country, and I know that this is a folk tradition. I can see something really strongly and deeply related to my culture. I can see old structures, buildings made of wood, made of stone. And this is a kind of a place, it's a character, but it's a question of our culture. I can see the roots of my culture, and it's a sense of belonging to place, it's a sense of my identity. So it's all together in this feeling, in this place. And one place can be a symbol of an identity, of a nation, of something more. So it's really not easy to describe it in this first presentation, but we will talk about it later. And the genius loci, it's a Roman concept. It means the spirit of a place, and it's something like not easy to explain, but it's the essence of the place, and it can be everything. It can be a building, it can be natural unit, it can be city, it can be just one house somewhere. So this is a huge topic, not easy to describe, but fortunately Heidegger wrote something about this in his philosophical thinking. So maybe you can find more in his works. I decided to give you some examples of when we say that there is a place with a genius loci and what it means. For many people, an example of such a place is Prague in Czech Republic. I don't know if you have ever been to Prague. I have been, and it's people say that it's a place with character. It's a special ambience. It's a mixture of architecture, because you can see really nice places in general term. There is a Charles Bridge, there are very old Gothic buildings, towers, and it's mixed with the modern styles, with different epochs, and it shows you not only a city, you see how the city was developed during centuries. You right now as a visitor, you can have such feeling of old ages, many years that passed in the city and formed the city into this new shape. So I think it's important to look and to observe cities in terms of how architecture shows us the development of society, the development of culture, and many times the barbarian style, when we destroy very old parts of cities and we replace them. So this is important to understand. So when we talk about city or town, I will use term city. It's easier for this presentation. The city is not only a concentration of buildings and facilities with various practical functions, but also means something more. It's a historically created form of human world. It's a significant framework into which and in relation to which a person schedules his life and his attempts to meaningfully fulfill it. It means that we really depend on the place, on the city where we live. If you do not have a city with many services and facilities, if you have problem with accommodation, and if you live in a very small flat and very far from the center, it influences you if you do not want. So this is when we talk about this interlinks between culture, identity, city, heritage. It's not easy to live in old buildings and in old cities, but it's not easy to live in hyper-modern cities as well. So we will think about what a city means, and city becomes city when one walks and sleeps in it, when one lives in it, because without inner experience, the city exists only as a pile of stones. And this is important to understand as well, because if the city doesn't exist really, and if the city is only a pile of stones and it's not active inside, we cannot talk about city, about active city, and about a real city. And what we see now in the world, that many places, maybe not cities but villages, are without inhabitants. The people move. Usually it's moving from rural areas to urban areas, and people need to leave the villages of or just their hometowns because they need employment, to find job, to earn money as well, and to have better living conditions. And when you see these trends, you see that many places, many villages, many cities just disappeared because people do not want to stay in. City can be seen in not only in explicit way. I mean, like, it's not only what I've been talking about. It can be also a philosophical world of meanings. Because when you look at the cities in different cultures, and when you look at different part of world, you see that a city can be constructed differently. The structures, the forms, the materials, and styles are different. So when you expect to see what you have around you and what exists around you in a foreign country, you will be surprised because it's not the same. And it's a maze of signs and symbols, because for cultures and different cultures it means something to have a big market in the center, to have a church, to have another shapes and other creatures and or constructions. It's linked with the roots and it's linked with the past of the city and of course of the culture. There were many artificial places coming to grow, and we see that majority of cities is developing the same way. There are coming new parts of cities that are dedicated only for, let's say, shopping or for housing and so on. So the services and facilities and living conditions are really influenced by how the city looks like. And then it's a question of very practical form of living in the city. You need transport, you need to go from one place to another one, you need to meet friends, you need to go for shopping. So it's really important how the city is constructed. And the city can be studied, searched as a culture phenomenon, because you can find everything, and especially culture of the city. The culture of the city cannot be associated only with a certain range of selected buildings and facilities for so-called cultural activities, nor can be identified exclusively with the aesthetic or historical monumental character of the buildings. City and culture, it's once again a topic we will talk about more later, and it's how city is affected by a city culture, what activities, performances, if a city can serve as a cultural scene or not, and of course if city support culture activities, if city support artists and artistic performances in public spaces. So it's once again it's a huge topic, and my question at the end of the presentation is the quality of the public space. Please look around you and think about how the quality of public space is developed in your case, in your hometown, and or not hometown, in the city you are staying or you are living. And please think about different categories of public activities. How is it affected by the quality of public space? And how is it maybe improving or decreasing? And what functions and social activities you can attend when you want, or why you are not attending such activities? What are the reasons? This will be my conclusion. This presentation starts a huge topic of cultural landscape. So I will ask you, what do you miss in your city? Or can you find a place with an exceptional genius Lottie? If you passed this presentation, you can write me to my email address and we can discuss this topic together. And I would like to ask you to not finish, but to continue in this presentation in the worksheet number 1 about cultural landscape, and to work on this topic, to read it carefully and to give me feedback. Thank you very much for your attention.